Sometimes a movie is just a movie, and sometimes an old forgotten film will turn out to be a legendary cinematic masterpiece that illuminates the audience with its effervescent brilliance. Horror Hospital is an example of when that absolutely and completely didn't happen. I was recently cruising the lowest echelons of the darkest side of the internet.
Is this a story about how you met your wife?
No, that's a whole different horror story.
Touché.
I came across an old film from 1973. It starred Robin Askwith, an actor with the charisma of unnecessary surgery and the screen presence of a plank of mouldy driftwood.
He stars, inexplicably, as a member of a 1960s rock band who gets beaten up by a man in a dress.
Chew up, psycho boy, hey?
And you might take some time outside.
As always happens in these situations, he decides to take a short break in the country where he thinks there might be girls, and away from the city where he's surrounded by, girls.
This film isn't big on logic, is it?
It's not.
Do you think it was written by a bunch of borderline alcoholic sci-fi authors with severe mental health disorders?
Might have been.
Just to nail home the horror aspect, the movie opens with a scene of the villainous Dr. Storm riding around in his car, driven by his dwarf assistant and beheading random escapees from the hospital.
And you watched this? All of this? You actually watched this without a gun to your head?
The main character, Jason, takes a train to get out for a few days of peace and relaxation in Horror Hospital, since he has the worst travel agent in recorded history.
On this train, he meets a young lady and delivers the worst opening line that's ever been recorded in human history.
Hi. That tastes good.
It's not bad, thank you very much.
Well, you're lucky. I didn't have time for any lunch.
Here, would you like one of these apples?
And just when you were thinking his charming and charismatic approach couldn't get any worse,
I think I'll go and get some coffee.
There's no need to get so uptight about things. I'm not going to rape you.
He's not exactly James Bond, is he?
he isn't. And the director has the subtlety of Sean Connery left alone with an attractive woman. Notice how, when he delivers what has to be the worst piece of dialogue in cinematic history, the train is seen zooming to camera, reminding us of the implied act, the classic train riding into the tunnel, to symbolically remind us about how sex works.
And that shows that the director isn't exactly Orson Welles. He's not even exactly J.J. Abrams.
Oh, come on, it's not that bad. And while the audience is drawing in its lips in the world's biggest collective cringe, telling her that he's not a sexual predator actually works, and her reply is essentially,
Would you like a piece of cheese as well?
who knew that that's how romantic situations actually get started?
I mean, you and Seth are married, so anything is possible, I guess. Are you married to an actual woman, or did you just dress up a cow in the old clothes your mum got too fat to wear?
Wow.
So they get off the train in the middle of nowhere and they begin to walk. As the rain falls, even though it was bright and sunny in the previous scene, two motorcycles appear out of nowhere and gaze at them threateningly. What would you do in a situation like this?
My goodness.
So they're put in the same room, and the young lady Judy just starts taking off her clothes, perhaps so she can have sex with him as a kind of thank you for not having forced himself upon her. Who can tell?
Nothing like this ever happened to you, did it?
It did not.
Perhaps you just never met the right kind of woman.
Perhaps.
But there are other factors to consider. There's your ugliness, your caustic personality, your lack of personal hygiene, your financial situation, your rampant alcoholism.
We all probably thought that offering not to assault a woman was the worst possible way to endear yourself to her, but we were wrong, and Jason approaches her in the shower with this horrendous line.
Thought I'd come and chat while you splash.
And it works.
And now the mystery really starts to ramp up when, over dinner, they meet the rest of the residents, staring zombies with dead, hollow eyes and lobotomy scars on their foreheads. I wonder what could possibly be happening.
Is that what happened to you?
Dr. Storm's plot is revealed in massive exposition dumps, but we're still none the wiser about exactly what it is that he's trying to do. None of his mind control experiments make the slightest sense. Does he just enjoy making men do gymnastics? Is he watching people trying to have sex in a small aquarium? Is he trying to get girls to like him? Does he just enjoy poking around inside people's brains?
Is that what happened to your wife?
Eventually another man joins the plot of this tangled mess. Abraham is just there looking for his missing girlfriend, but after being told it's too late for her, he gives up on the idea and just tags along for no real reason. Why he's there is anyone's guess, but it certainly isn't to advance the plot. They're variously captured and escape, often by pushing the dwarf through small spaces. He works for them now. But there's a monster who looks like somebody washed a condom and then put it in a spin dryer on full heat. They have the good sense not to let the camera linger on it for too long.
This film was written and directed by legendary hack Antony Balch. His classics include Bizarre, Bill and Tony, and William Buys a Parrot. He's more popularly known for buying up European exploitation sex movies and giving them English titles such as Weird Weirdo.
You're making this up.
No, I wish I was. He was known affectionately as the Abominable Snowman. Batch died in 1980 of stomach cancer.
Did he eat one of his own movies?
That's offensive. You know, 2 of my cousins died that way.
The ones you don't talk about. Six-fingered Sydney and his wife, the one who dribbles a lot and has to wear rubber underwear.
Anyway, Horror Hospital is his last movie and is recorded as a horror comedy. It fails on both counts.
But, so what? Who the hell cares? Aren't you supposed to do story analysis, not moan about softcore pornography made by directors who wrote the script while apparently licking poisonous frogs?
I'm getting to that.
Antony Balch was a close friend of insane piece of crap William S. Burroughs. Burroughs was famous for shooting his wife in the head in Mexico, around precisely the same time as realising he was actually gay. Pretty convenient. He then kept himself busy being a heroin addict, joining the Church of Scientology, trying to curse people who had annoyed him by using magic, and wasting the time of readers with his horribly disjointed books.
So, are you, or are you not a fan? I'm getting mixed signals.
I'm not. You see, I believe that a story is a cohesive journey that respects both the story, the characters, and the audience. William S. Burroughs believed in a method called the cut-up, in which he takes sentences, chops them apart, and puts them back in random orders to see what works. He also did this with the chapters of his stories, which means that they can't have a cohesive plot of any kind.
His most well-known work, Naked Lunch, was a series of vignettes that could more or less be read in any order since there was no real connection between them. At the time of release, it was considered highly offensive, and moves were made to have it banned. Luckily, they failed.
Luckily? Wouldn't it be better for everyone if it languished in some forgotten corner of the internet? Like, I don't know, Edgeverse, for example.
Censorship is evil, the shadow of the dark side of the Force, that is.
Burroughs' work was at least semi-autobiographical, and considering that he wrote about the recruitment of assassins and often bragged about his use of various weapons, there have been allegations that he was involved in the MK-Ultra mind control experiments and that, in fact, his whole beat counterculture movement was connected to social engineering plans towards a one-world government.
While working with Balch, he wrote a novel, The Wild Boys, about how a group of homosexuals destroy civilization. Of course, at the time it seemed ridiculous, but now... Burroughs was smart enough to conflate the growth of liberalism with the increase of government and the reduction of personal freedom, something he stood against. As he got older, he became increasingly right-wing and spoke out about the abolition of government and the growth of personal freedom.
But how does any of this relate to a stupid, camp piece of nonsense, fronted by the dubious acting talents of a man who tries really hard to look like Mick Jagger's fetal alcohol syndrome-riddled younger brother?
Well put.
Well, Balch was heavily influenced by William S. Burroughs. His short film, William Buys a Parrot, is a silent movie where William buys a parrot, shockingly, and his later film, The Cut-Ups, was written by and also featured Burroughs. It wasn't well received, also shockingly. Horror Hospital had a fairly routine plot of an evil scientist hidden behind a flimsy facade, controlling young people for his own psychotic and utterly confusing ends, who is discovered by a young couple who overcome the situation and ultimately escape by destroying his plans.
But the cut-up method doesn't allow for a cohesive plot. Instead, we have to look at the symbolism, since that's really all there is here to look at.
The film opens with a scene that establishes how evil the villain is. The villain is played by Michael Gough, who was told to just act like Bela Lugosi. While these people all believed in creativity and originality, they didn't actively practice it. We then shift to our protagonist. He accuses a transvestite, or God knows what, of stealing his song and is then attacked and quite easily beaten into submission. The film makes no moral judgment, nor does it elaborate on the theft. Instead, the transvestite assumes the moral high ground by being outraged at the anger from his victim. Symbolically, this implies that the person, represented by a man dressed as a woman, had a right to take whatever they wanted, and their violent action was justified. Jason then meets a girl on a train. The camera focuses on her legs, showing us his immediate sexual interest. These two people barely know each other, and their only connection throughout the movie is a sexual one. The romance is handled incredibly clumsily, as if the writers have absolutely no idea how women actually behave, because presumably they really don't.
Women can be very troublesome, Mr. Jones.
The story is, therefore, one of a mad doctor, a symbol of the establishment of wealth and power controlling the minds of young people to sexually abuse and otherwise impose his will on them. The plan, which is never really explained, is thwarted by people who believe in free love and the counterculture movement. The movie is representing the same desires expressed in Burroughs' book about a group of homosexuals bringing down society with free love. It doesn't seem unlikely that Balch really believed that that is exactly what he was doing, promoting his political ideas in the movie to help foster a movement that would eventually bring down the collapse of everything they despised. There is even a scene where the mindless young people, somehow controlled by a machine which is later smashed. Burroughs wrote a line in one of his poems, "Smash the control images, smash the control machine." The machine in this instance represents control in general and the governments who use it. It was an idea he used many times.
Smash the control images, smash the control machine.
Now we can look back on this and see that all it did was provide a small motivation towards the corruption of the family unit, which ultimately drove towards the liberal agenda, which was something he was violently opposed to.
It's almost as if this was all part of the plan, isn't it?
Antony Balch was a man who bought European porn films for next to nothing and peddled them to an English audience, but he saw himself as an artist, and was easily drawn into all of this by William S. Burroughs, a charismatic voice that told him exactly what he wanted to hear. Burroughs was barking mad, and although he thought he was undermining society, he was actually being driven by the very establishment he spoke out against. I can't say if the accusations of him being part of the American MKUltra mind control experiments were true, but as the son of a wealthy family who invested in the tech industry, and someone getting away with all manner of crimes and still finding himself in the heart of the entertainment industry, it is possible, and not even unlikely. He probably saw something in Balch, exploited him, and then moved on when there was nothing left to take.
So this movie represents the idea that free sexual expression will bring down the establishment, the evil force that's controlling young people for its own ends.
Well, the symbolism is certainly there to suggest it. But what's really interesting is that at one point the evil doctor explains, in as close as we get to a plot, that he's applying his techniques to control and stimulate sexual behaviour. It's almost as if the film is commenting on its own failure, an ironic self-defeating statement about how the free love movement itself was fostered by the very establishment it was designed to take down.
Of course, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, and a bad movie is just a bad movie.
Ultimately, it's one of those movies that's so utterly terrible that it's actually really fun to watch. It makes no sense whatsoever, from the bubbling pits of quicksand to the villain having his head chopped off, which only slows him down a bit. It's all just a slice of incompetent nonsense. But beneath all that, it was trying to make a point, and a valid one at that. This was part of a conspiracy by a group of experimental artists to destroy the government and replace it with a freer and more just society. But their efforts served to push counterculture in the opposite direction. For art to work, it has to inspire, and there's nothing very inspirational here. There's just a bunch of disjointed symbolism that mostly fails to hit the mark.